Imagine a vibrant green landscape. There are hills scattered all around, and a river cutting right through. There's a herd of sheep grazing by the riverside, and as you look around, you can also spot a dark, gray wolf scouting around, looking for lunch. You see it spots the sheep and starts to approach closer and closer. Suddenly, something cuts through the herd and gets out in front, barking to scare off the intruder. This is just one instance where a sheepdog protects its herd from predators like wolves. And it might not seem like it, but this situation is also very similar to our world. The mass majority of the people make up the sheep. Those few who are toxic and greedy are the wolves. And those who protect the sheep are the sheepdogs. David Grossman introduced this theory in his book On Combat, and he focused mainly on how this scenario applies to law enforcement and violent crimes. Well, if he's already written a book, then why am I here? Well, this scenario also applies to all aspects of life and to all of us. Now, you guys probably have already started to wonder, what character do you play in this scenario? Well, since we're human, we don't fall in rigid categories, and instead, we fall on more like a spectrum. We can take the traits that stand out the most, and we can use those to place ourselves, getting a better idea of where we are. So let's start at the end of the spectrum, the wolf. The main characteristic of a wolf is valuing personal gain at the expense of others. As we move along, some of the weaker traits include being negative, being toxic, using demeaning language. Now, on to the one that most people tend to place themselves at, sheep. David Grossman's theory is that most people are wired to be sheep, to stick with the herd. When there's multiple of us, sheep tend to think that the responsibility to take action isn't on them anymore, and they wait for someone to do something. There's even a study done by Latane and Darley, where they created a simulation where there was one person there to help a victim in need. And that one person helped the victim 85% of the time, which is pretty good. But when they had 6 people there to help that one victim, the victim was only helped 31% of the time. That's pretty counterintuitive. But that experiment encompasses the 3 main characteristics of sheep: passiveness, herd mentality, and the ability to bear injustice. As we move along, we have only speaking up for themselves, or only speaking up when it benefits them. Finally, we're on to our sheepdog traits, which include speaking up to protect others, confronting wolves, and taking ownership, responsibility of their community. Now that we've gone over the spectrum, why don't we take a few moments and think about where we would place ourselves? Are you more like a passive sheep, a cunning wolf, or a protective sheepdog? Now, no matter where you've placed yourself, there are a few key things you can do to help yourself move across the spectrum. The first is to make a conscious decision, to intentionally change your mindset. In doing so, you can become ready to take action. You become ready to be aware, alert. Take my story, for example. When I first came to this school, I wasn't used to being in a learner-driven community where we made our own processes and kept each other accountable. Whenever I saw something wrong, I would wait for someone to do something. I was afraid that if I spoke up, I would be judged. However, Soon I realized that I couldn't wait for someone to do something because there was no guarantee that someone else would speak up. If I saw something wrong, it was my responsibility to take action. And so I had to make that conscious decision to bring up the issues that I saw. Now, after you make a conscious decision, the next step is to really take action. Now, when you do this, you are implementing that intention that you've created, and you can actually then protect the herd. Continuing from my story, once I had made that conscious decision, I had to actually take action. I had to motivate myself and encourage myself because, to be honest, I was scared. But once I did take that action and bring it up in our weekly meetings, I felt much more motivated, and I realized that it did make a difference. Now, the third and final thing you can do is to build resilience. As you move yourself across the spectrum, you'll start to face more and more adversity. Because when you take action, what you're doing is for the benefit of the herd. However, sometimes the sheep might not always like that because you're being a disagreeable giver of some sort. So it's important to keep going and to continue to confront those wolves in order to protect your herd. Now, I know these 3 steps might seem daunting to start, right? But you can take smaller steps. Confront and scare away those smaller wolf pups before facing that big bad wolf that's out there. And you'll see that through deliberate practice and intentionally taking action, your herd will be much better, much more protected. So I'll end it here. This spectrum applies to all of us, and we all fall here one way or another. But whether you choose to be a sheep, a wolf, or a sheepdog, that's for you to decide.